I'm calling the September 14th, 2017 meeting of the Conservation Commission for the town of Mashpee.
Did you push this?
I did.
Oh, you did, I'm sorry.
If, is there anyone in the audience who has anything not on the agenda that they'd like to discuss? Drew?
I did not have a chance to review the minutes from August 24th, so those will have to be tabled to the next meeting on September 27th.
Okay.
You have a few updates that were put on the pre-post, but there's nothing to vote on, so it's okay with the commission. I can just bring them up and we can have discussion, but there's nothing that requires any voting. It has some most recent correspondence with the Air Force contracting department to finalize the funding for the Upper Quashnet restoration. There's a lot of back and forth details as far as the. Thank you. A lot of back and forth details as far as the breakdown of the line items and costs that Horsley Witten had submitted to me first, to our department first, and then I forwarded them on to the Air Force. And the Air Force has kind of changed their way of dealing with contracts over the years. And as you all recall, Rose Forbes is our liaison to the Air Force Civil Engineer Center. She did make it known that there were, some additional requirements, so to speak, for finalizing funding. So we managed to work through all of that. It took a lot of back and forth with Horsley Witten and the Air Force Contracting Center, just to figure out, prevailing wages for labor, equipment costs, all of these line item breakdowns that are going to be part of this restoration project, as well as explaining that the scope of impact from the failed berm area, which is the reason for the river, the Upper Quashnet River needing restoration, that it involves investigation north and south of the immediate subsidence area, because it's all one connected system, and the subsidence has resulted in a reduced flow, which has caused excessive aquatic vegetation growth to the north of the berm failure, and warm temperatures and water siltation to the south. And so in order to come up with some restoration scenarios for the commission to review, those areas need to be studied outside of the impact area, and that needed to be clarified with the Air Force, because they were looking at it as singularly focusing on the berm subsidence area and nothing outside of that. So it took some, a little bit of explaining to make that clear that there are going to be additional costs involved for investigating those areas, particularly if the chosen scenario of restoration is a river realignment scenario. Then you're looking at the north and western bog ditches as a potential realignment area, which also involves additional subsurface investigation as far as how deep the sand layer is, how deep the peat layer is. We've done some of that with ground penetrating radar, but only a limited scope, so more of that needs to be done. But anyway, it finally got clarified, and we submitted Horsley Witten submitted a final draft of expenses, and it was accepted by the Air Force. So
Changed significantly?
That's just more detail. I mean, nothing new as far as costs. It's just, investigation or justification of those costs, greater detail of where those estimates come from. And but now we've finally, I don't know what the timeline is to actually start, tell Horsley Witten to start moving on this, where we can rest assured that we'll be able to build them, or they'll be able to bill us, and we'll be able to pay them within a reasonable timeline. So that's just what I'm waiting to hear.
Whose call is it to the start date?
What's that?
Who's going to make the call?
Once we hear about when the funds are available, when the account has been, dedicated to this purpose. The way it works is the Air Force is going to oversee the funding. We get billed by Horsley Witten, and then we forward that on to the Air Force. But the account won't be a town-controlled account. It'll be held by the government. But it is fully dedicated to the funding for this project. It just won't be, the account won't be under the town's control. It'll be under the Air Force control.
So
But it is dedicated funding.
That starts when the federal government puts the money into it.
Correct. Yes.
Then we could start the work.
Exactly. Yep.
They have more money than we do anyway.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Maybe debt, but they got it.
Right. We have time for one more update, or should we move?
Why don't we go ahead and start?
Sure.
I'm opening the hearing for Stuart and Catherine J. Nixdorf, 18 Little Neck Lane, a proposed driveway reconstruction and RDA. We've had a request from their agent that we continue this until September 28th, and that would be at 6:03 PM.
Correct.
Move we continue this application to September 28th at 6, did you say?
6:03.
6:03 PM.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes. Opening the 6:03 hearing for Richard Casula, 379 Monomoskoye Road, proposed construction of footbridge and after-the-fact permit of landscape wall and sand deposition. This is continued from July 13th, 2017, so that the homeowner could address wetlands violations. It's a notice of intent.
I don't think BSS is here yet. Well, they should be. I know this wasn't continued again, so that's my knowledge anyway.
Well, do you think they're going to be here? Should we just hold it for a bit?
I would just table it for.
Table it for a
Yeah,
while?
to the end of the agenda.
Right. And that is tabled till later this evening. Opening the 6:06 hearing for Sam S. and Heather G. Fisher, 750 Cotuit Road.
Not 6:06.
Yeah, according to that clock, we're not there.
Okay,
My
that's
watch is
true.
6:06, but that
Good
doesn't
point.
count.
Drew, you had another item?
Yeah,
The person,
Yeah?
yeah, yeah. We'll get to you in just a few minutes.
It's announced so that anyone who wants to come and listen to it doesn't have to be here
Right.
until 6:06.
Just another update for everyone is, I think I had given you some background on this before, but the Johns Pond fish ladder, as you all know, needs some work. It needs some erosion control work and some investigation as to whether or not it's suitable for the size of the impoundment of Johns Pond and the fish passage, adequacy of fish passage. So the overall structure of the fish ladder and its ability to pass fish requires more investigation. So I had met out there with Marine Fisheries, with Greg Berman from Woods Hole Sea Grant, who's a coastal geologist, to look at what the issues are with the ladder, and we broke down what needs to happen as far as a study. Number one, identifying the causes of erosion and dealing with that, with the eroding up and downstream embankments, and doing a hydraulic and hydrology analysis of the structure itself and Johns Pond. The Southport development area has as you all know, it's a retirement community off Old Barnstable Road. They applied to DEP for a water withdrawal permit to do irrigation on the golf course, and a requirement of that is to do mitigation somewhere in town, off-site mitigation. And looking at different possibilities, we were asked if there were any priority projects the Conservation Department was working on, and we identified Johns Pond Fish Ladder as one of the top priorities. So I had some conversations with Ron Bonvy, who's the head man in charge over there at Southport.
Yeah, the
Developer, and we're looking at getting that funding. It's going to be a monetary mitigation, $40,000 is the calculated amount he came up with in working with DEP as mitigation for their water withdrawal permit. So that's going to be donated, so to speak, to the Conservation Department, and that funding should cover most, if not all, of the planning and permitting work that needs to be done for Johns Pond, because that will come before you as a commission. Most likely DPW would be the applicant. But just so you know, that too has been finalized, and we're just awaiting funding for that. So couple of good news items, coming up on the horizon as far as funding goes, which is never easy. But that's all I have. So.
Great. And so are we available then to discuss 379 Monomoskoye?
We had called the meeting earlier, Tom, but they tabled it until you got here.
So we're reopening the 6:03 hearing for Richard Cosella, 379 Monomoskoye Road. This is the proposed construction of a footbridge and after-the-fact permit of landscape wall and sand deposition. It's continued from July 13, 2017, so that the homeowner could address wetlands violations. An NOI.
There's probably a better one, the black one. I think it's a little more stable. Does that not have a,
Do you have the plan on that?
I'm sorry, I don't. You could use the other one, it's still functional.
Thank you. I'll offer the design. Thank you for your patience. About 6 weeks, or maybe it's 8 weeks ago now, had a continuance of this project where we did propose, as the announcement said, a footbridge. This project started, though, with an enforcement order for some sand that was deposited on a salt marsh area that washed over more of the salt marsh into Little River. So we requested a continuance to get more information, part of which was to have a wetland specialist identify the upper limit of the salt marsh. And, so we did that and talked to the owner, and so we have withdrawn our request to do that footbridge. And then there was another bit of landscaping work over here. I was taking out a lawn area and putting in sand and some grasses. All of that is out of their request now. And this plan is now only to answer and repair some past violations, some being the sand, and then more recently there was some trimming, cutting of some of the trees and shrubs. So Mark Manganello from LEC and I met Drew out at the site about a week and a half ago to take a look at it and decide what should be done. And so it decided between Drew and Mark on the delineation of the salt marsh, which is maybe just slightly downhill from the existing wall, which was built sort of at that rack line and what you see there, but then it cuts across upland from the far end of that wall. So that wall, there's a little return on the wall at the south end of that wall, at the very far end in the right-hand side picture. See, there's a stake up there, and that was determined to be the upper edge of the salt marsh. So this wall, basically the south half of the wall will be pulled landward. You can see a little angle about where that bird is. Is that a bird?
Yeah, duck.
Pointing out where there's a little angle in the wall. So from there south, it will be moved up to where the inner end of that return is now. So it'll be a more acute
Tom,
angle.
If you want to use the yellow button, it's got the laser pointer.
From this picture here, right up, there's a return about 2 feet right here. So the wall can stay in this location up to a location there, which is shown on the plan. It's about 28 feet from the beginning to this point, and another 27 feet of this wall will be moved inland, so it will run from here to here, like that. And it'll have to be built about 4 inches taller. You see the sand is a little too high over here. 4 inches taller, and then also, at least down this end, it would have to be built down a little bit lower, because at the south end of this, actually, that wall is being undermined a little bit. So I have a little section showing the top of the wall will be built about 4 inches higher. So instead of one, what they have now is a 2x6. It'll take about two 2x6s, going up 4 inches and about down 2 inches to make the height of the wall proper. So that wall will be moved. Sand will be pulled back. More sand will be pulled back and brought up to the top of the wall. And below the wall, planted with Spartina patens, the is it cordgrass?
Salt marsh cordgrass.
Salt marsh
Yep.
cordgrass in this area here to revegetate that as an upper salt marsh. And these grasses here will be taken out. They can be still stay on site, but move landward and all along here, and then up through this area where some cutting was done. And there's an old, there was a marine railway coming out through here at one time, and part of that rail is still exposed up in this location here. And so all along the upper side of this wall and then up to the top end of that rail will be planted with the native shrubs, such as beach plum, bayberry, and it's on here, but it's
Groundsel.
groundsel.
Groundsel bush,
Yeah.
yep.
Spaced along the upper side of this wall and up to that, as I said, these grasses can be moved inland and sand this moving of the wall, pulling the sand back, planting shrubs will be done, as I said, to right all of the past wrongs. And there's a note on there to check with Drew about the exact spacing and sizing of the shrubs, things like that. That should, I believe that's what we had discussed, and I think that should, as long as it's done properly, should take care of everything. Any questions?
I guess my question would be of Drew and perhaps the harbor master, as to whether there's been any encroachment into the channel of Little River based on secretion of this illegal sand that was thrown into the water. What has happened to that as it deployed into the channel? Is it creating any navigation issues?
No, you can see from the top right photo, that's the limit of the sand right there where you see it meet the Spartina alterniflora, which is the lower salt marsh cordgrass. We did, when we were out there with myself, Tom, and Mark Manganella from LEC, we did observe, we took a look at the site, and there's been no sand. That grass is pretty thick, it just stopped right there. Any sand that went through that area would be minimal at best, and certainly wouldn't cause any kind of significant fill into the creek. But I didn't personally observe any sand making it into the creek itself. He put down filter cloth beneath the sand. In some areas it's thicker than others. It kind of varies in its thickness, but that wall that I had him put up, which was kind of a temporary measure when I first discovered the violation, was really primarily to stop that kind of thing from happening. So it did its job in the meantime, and now it needs to be reworked a little bit to keep the sand, once the sand is removed, which will all be by hand, by the way, because we were discussing that on site too, because the thickness does vary from one spot to another. So hand raking to get down to the peat organic before the Spartina grass is planted. Raising that retaining wall profile a little bit to make sure that the sand behind it and any areas that may be leaching out from underneath are secured for the long term. We discussed, what types of shrubs would make a good kind of barrier buffer mitigation area above the upper salt marsh. Those are all types of plants you would typically find in high marsh transition BVW area in a coastal environment. And this would, if the commission accepts this plan of mitigation, it would also come as a condition with a 3-year monitoring and maintenance requirement through a qualified professional to be hired by the applicant and submit annual reports to ensure the success of all of these plantings. So it's not just a one and done, see you later type of deal. It's going to be monitored for 3 years because it's a violation. So that will be a condition in the permit. And just to kind of go over there was mention that you see in the plan, some additional plantings over on the, as the wall wraps around in the background there on the right photo. And kind of on the left photo behind those pilings, you'll see additional plantings. The cutting that took place there was relatively minor. There were a couple of small saplings, pine saplings that were cut, and then some branches off of some other pines that were cut as well. But we wanted to make sure that the mitigation was substantial in that area because that cutting took place after the sand was deposited. So, and after I had approached the homeowner about that, so it was just, willful disregard of wetland standards after he had already been notified about this previous violation. So that's why we wanted to make sure that mitigation was really pretty robust as part of this plan. And that too will also be covered under that monitoring and maintenance, all mitigation, salt marsh and above, will be required to have that 90% success rate over a 3-year period by virtue of the submission of annual reports. So that will be forthcoming if you decide to accept this notice of intent for the, and I think it was smart on the behalf of the homeowner to disregard the walking bridge. I think he was already knee-deep in violations, and don't push the envelope when it comes to asking for something when you're already in this kind of situation. So I think it was a good move to eliminate that from the.
So is a normal way in which I put my kayak in, which is stored upland in this property, I come down over that sand and over that grass and then launch it into Little River? I mean, they're in the business of storing kayaks so that you can launch into Little River.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know they rent out dock space, but I didn't know about
But
kayak
also
launching.
kayaks. I have a neighbor who has their kayaks down there for the purpose of getting into the water relatively easy.
If that's adversely affecting the mitigation, then.
Well, that's-
obviously-
Well,
That's
you
what
can't,
I'm
it's going to
saying
be
is-
a condition of mitigation that it cannot be altered in any way.
Well, okay, so that's,
We'll make sure that that's a
yeah, I
condition
think
as
it
well.
needs to be
Yeah.
covered, because you've got to
Absolutely.
push that sand into the channel.
Yeah.
That's right, I didn't see any where people have been walking up and down, like, the marsh grass is pretty good.
Yeah, there's no trails through there's no walking trails that are currently existing through the marsh grass, but it's still, it's a good thing to make note of, because you can tell his ultimate goal here was to create a beach down to the shoreline. So we want to make sure that,
Makes it
he's
awfully
got,
easy for people
he's
to
got
get their
access to the
kayak in.
docks. And so he's got shoreline, water access already in place. There's no need for additional access. It's not a coastal beach area, it's a salt marsh. But we'll make sure that condition is put into place for.
Okay, good.
And did I understand correctly that you haven't specified how many plants or how closely they'd be spaced, is that right?
Well, they are shown on, the numbers are shown on the plan.
Three to 4
Numbers are
feet
shown?
on center.
Yeah, oh, okay,
It depends on the gallon nursery size that's available, that dictates the spacing.
right.
They're shown on the plan, maybe 4 feet apart. That's the approximate number.
You mentioned you were going to consult with Drew as to the details.
The person doing this should talk through exactly.
Yeah, I mean, when order of conditions gets issued to the applicant, he'll be called in to discuss that particular condition about hiring a consultant to do a 3-year monitoring and maintenance plan. That's going to be absolutely required before anything gets started. We have to see a signed contract. That's in our mitigation regulation 12.
So this will all be in the order of conditions?
Correct, yeah.
And I guess does anybody have any additional? Is there anyone in the audience who has any comments on this? project. So we will need a condition as to the business of gaining access for kayaks with, or in any way damaging the mitigation plantings.
Yep.
Given that, I would move that we close an issue in regards to the application at 379 Monomoskoye Road.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion is passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're opening the 606 hearing, Sam S. and Heather G. Fisher, 750 Cotuit Road. This is for the proposed installation of landscape and hardscape improvements and beach access. An RDA. I'm sorry, I just mentioned that it's an RDA. Could you introduce yourself for the
My
record?
name is Sam Fisher. I'm the owner of the property. My wife is not present tonight, it's just me.
Just tell us
If
a
you could
little bit about
describe-
what you're going to do.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was a little new to this process.
Of course.
A little bit. So we purchased the property in 2012. We have, since then, obviously, been some tough winters. We've had a tremendous amount of erosion. This would be the driveway side, on the other side facing down to the water. Where that deck is, in this spot here, I probably lost about 2 feet of land. As you can see, those logs, where I guess a partial retaining wall at the time, was before I bought the house. They're rolling down the hill.
Okay, and could you use a microphone? Because we are on.
They're rolling down the hill right now. It's gotten worse every year. That little footpath, you can see to the right corner there, is just smaller and smaller. Where the deck is next to that bush, I mean, that's just gone by at least 2 feet is missing there. It gets worse as it goes down. The stairs here, the lower left picture, as you descend towards the water, you can sort of see the left side. There's no more grass, it's just become a gravel pit, basically, and rocks are rolling down the hill. I've got little trough marks from where the rain is just carving the hillside. And then on the right lower picture there, which is on the right side of the property, my pathway, and Drew was there, all the steps are dislodged, all the little pebbles that were to support that, they're rolling down the hill. Everything's rolling down the hill. I'm just trying to stop it from happening and getting worse. And there's also, on this picture on the right side, where the dock meets the staircase there, you can hit the sign. Wish we could zoom in a little bit. But those are all old railroad ties that were there before I bought the house, and I purposely did not fix those this year so Drew could see them when he came on the property. They're all dislodged. So it's actually a real hazard to walk down there. Obviously, being respectful to the laws of Mashpee, I'm not going to do a thing until I get your approval, but I just want to, A, fix it so the land doesn't erode anymore, and B, make it safe so I can walk down the hill to the waterfront. I have no intention of doing anything dramatic. You saw the drawings that Bonadio's did. I just want to make the property safe again and not You're looking a little bit of this process, so.
So you can see the drawings submitted by the architect just kind of show each one of the areas of concern and
I'm not sure
what's
we've seen
being.
anything here.
What's that?
I'm not sure we've seen anything.
I think you got the wrong one there, Brad. That's a different project.
Pickle Cove?
No, this is 750 Cotuit Road. Should have the,
Cover looks like this.
yeah. That's the one. You just put it down. Behind that piece of paper. Yeah, right there, Brad.
This one?
Nope.
Oh,
that's
here.
it right there. Yeah.
Sorry.
So, I've been out to the property a couple of times, and starting with this is probably the worst situation on the property right now. This picture is just a close-up of what's happening here in this shaded area, and it's a narrow kind of bypass here to get around the corner of the deck, and this is a pretty steep, you can't really tell from the picture, but it's a pretty steep drop-off, probably a good 6 or 7 feet straight down into a gully. And it just continues to wash out, and you can see what's being proposed there on the first page is putting in some landscaping and hardscaping, a retaining wall to stop that erosion. And then really just dealing with the two pathways. He's got two pathways to the water, one on the right and left side. The resource area is inland bank leading to bordering land subject to flooding or beachfront associated with Mashpee Wakeby Pond. And both the access pathways down are just getting degraded. And so there's nothing really that's being proposed that's outside the footprint of anything. It's really the shoring up areas of erosion or updating existing pathways. The only thing that's probably a little bit expanded from the footprint is in the lower right photo. You can see, I didn't get a shot of the shed is to the right, where you can see that wood planking there. And then you've got a lot of washout and stone. In front of that, there is proposed to be a small fire pit in that area, but it's all previously disturbed and just kind of messed up by runoff. So that's really the only area of expansion out from any existing footprint upgrades that's being proposed. So,
That wooden plank,
yeah,
just the edge of the photograph would come out, and that would be just
yeah,
big rock.
stonework in that area, yeah.
That's gonna pull in
Yeah.
soon, too.
Yep. And then here at the bottom of this, looking at the property from the shoreline up the hill, this is the pathway that's on the right side. There's a lot of washout here. This is where the dislodged landscape ties are coming out. And so just to solidify that area with more stonework, just to prevent any further washout onto the shoreline here. So mostly just cosmetic upgrades to deal with runoff situations.
Does anyone in the audience have any comments on this?
Do we have
Make
any
a-
concern for how we pull out the landscape timbers that have been there and how we dispose of those or anything of that nature?
Yeah, you just want to make sure that you dispose of them at a licensed facility, because some of those old ones probably have creosote and
I'll do
So,
whatever is
Bourne
the right thing to
landfill
do.
usually takes,
Yeah, the contractor, I'm sure, will take
Yeah.
care of it the
contractor
proper
will
way.
take care of that.
Very reputable
Yeah.
company.
Good.
Bondio,
Looks
so
like it.
It's a nice piece of property, and I value it immensely. I'm not gonna let anybody walk on there that doesn't know what they're doing. I checked his references and some of the work he did in other places, so
Good.
I'm not gonna bring a poor contractor onto the property. I'm not interested in doing that.
Motion for a negative determination.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Motion passes.
Good to go.
The negative determination. Good to go.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Opening the 6:09 hearing for James R. and Barbara M. Keene at 103 Pickerel Cove Circle. This is a permit for an existing dock, an RDA.
Good evening. My name's Jim King, my wife is Barbara. Property's been in the family since the 1950s. We recently kind of inherited took over the property about 10 years ago. We're absent with our estate most of the time. We spoke to the assistant harbor master about 3 weeks ago when we found out the dock needed to be registered, so we started the permit process.
Excuse me, could you use the mic, please?
Step
Sorry.
over.
Sorry.
Did you hear everything I said? I don't know.
That's yeah, it'll be okay.
I think we're good.
We're good. Continue.
It's just that we got an indication that your mic wasn't adequate, so. But you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're good to go.
You had said you had spoken with the assistant harbor master, and he said that.
Yeah, the harbor master, basically.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
So this is, you've seen many of these before. This is an old dock. They presented photographic evidence that it certainly predates the Wetlands Protection Act. Chapter 91 license, but no local permit with the town. So, it doesn't have a Chapter 91 license, but it's grandfathered. In order to get a Chapter 91 license, they need a permit from the local town first. And as I said, you can see there's photos that were presented in part of your packet that show the dock was in existence prior to the Wetlands Protection Act. So even though it doesn't meet today's specs, it's grandfathered in its footprint, so. I would recommend a negative determination.
Okay. And are we asking him to identify the basic?
Information about.
Yes, one of the requirements that we have when it comes to permitting docks in town is that we require the homeowners to display through like either a placard or a wooden, the home address, the property address, just in case something gets dislodged, it floats across, you can't, in a storm or something like that, we can identify who it belongs to and retrieve it back to the homeowner.
Is the dock actually assigned numbers or registration?
It does when you get a Chapter 91 license, but for our purposes under the town, it makes more sense to have the property address displayed on each separate portion of the dock. Yep. So we'll just need that as a requirement after the permitting.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
Okay. Anyone in the audience have any comments, or? Gentlemen?
I'd move for a negative determination in regards to the application of James and Barbara Keane at 103 Pickerel Cove Circle.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Good.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Opening the 6/12 hearing for Robert and Sherry J. Garf, 9 Sunset Circle. This is the proposal for the construction of a seasonal dock and an after-the-fact permit to allow for demolition and reconstruction of a deck on an existing dwelling. It's an RDA.
Good evening. I'm Rob Garf. I'm the owner of 9 Sunset on Johns Pond. Which one would you like to start with? Looks like.
Deck, sure, we'll start with the deck and then go to the dock.
Okay, so we're rebuilding the house, as you can see here, at 9 Sunset. Our initial conservation approval and building permit did not include the deck because I didn't think I'd have to redo it. After the builder got into it, it was a mess. It was falling down. It was not safe. Water was leaking in through. I can go on and on. It wasn't up to today's standard. So he took it down. He rebuilt it in like a day and a half. And then I stepped back and I said, I need to go through the process and make sure I do the right thing. And here we are. So I submitted the after-the-fact application for this and submitted the commensurate drawings as well.
It's the same footprint, correct?
It's actually a reduced footprint because I didn't want to risk anything, and I also wanted some nice land between the deck and the water. So it brings it, we gain about 4.5, roughly 4.5 feet from where actually the deck went to before.
Okay.
Okay. And then a dock.
Here it is.
So, no one has any questions about that?
No.
Go to the dock.
Sorry, onto the dock?
Yeah.
Sure. moving
Yeah,
on.
so we want a dock. And so I called the Mass DEP. They were able to find a license for the prior owner. And I worked closely with David Hill, who, from the Mass DEP, and I've been going through the process of the simplified application, and it sounded like, Drew, similar to what you just mentioned from the prior
Right.
individual. Part of the process is to go to the local conservation and submit whatever requisite paperwork that then I go back to Mass DEP and follow the steps with them.
Yep. Yeah. So this is a previously licensed dock that just needed, just like the previous application, needs to be recognized by the local town authority, so he can start the process with Chapter 91. And he's got should have the simplified license plan on your, in your packet.
So this dock is actually now in place,
It's not in
It
place.
is not in place, no.
but it
But it has been.
But it's
They
licensed.
burnt it
Licensed,
because there's a
yeah.
lot of nails. Anyways, I think it's not there anymore. So we are planning on going to the place right in Lakeville that all my neighbors have gotten their docks from
Right.
and buying it from there.
Okay. Any questions from the audience?
Okay. Hearing none, I would go for a negative determination in regards to this application of Robert and Sherry Garf at 9 Sunset Circle.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
If I could just for a moment, so I'm obviously new to this process. I'm the general contractor. When I bought a place in the Cape, everybody's like, you're not going to be able to do anything. The Conservation Commission, the building folks have been amazing. I'm building this myself. And Cynthia, Caitlin, Patricia on the building side, it's just thank you. It's been great for me. So I know I have steps to go, and I'll make sure I follow the process. I just want to thank you for so far.
Welcome to Mashpee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Calling the 6:15 hearing for Robert M. and Marjorie A. Hackett, 3 Stanley Road. This is a proposed septic system upgrade. It's an RDA.
I'm Sam Iamelli with JC Engineering, representing the project at 3 Stanley Road. We're going to be upgrading the existing septic system just inside of a flood zone. The whole system will be located inside the existing stone driveway. And no other resources areas will be involved in this project.
It's amazing. Stanley Road.
So Board of Health has determined the property is not located within a Zone 2 water recharge area. The plan's approved for a conventional Title V system to accommodate the existing 3-bedroom dwelling. Application approved on the plan dated August 7th, 2017 from JC Engineering. The lot, as you can see from both the plan and the photos, is a landlocked lot, but it's mapped within the 100-year floodplain on Monomoskoye Island. So it's a landlocked lot. And you can see the work is all taking place in the driveway layout, which is most clearly shown in the bottom left photo. Bottom right just shows the setback from the water, a few hundred feet away from the nearest wetland resource area. So all work is taking place over previously disturbed landscaped or driveway area, and I would recommend a negative determination.
So this is going to remain a permeable surface on the driveway? The driveway will remain a permeable surface then? Are there any comments from the audience?
Motion for a negative determination.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion is approved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Stanley. Okay.
Opening the 6:18 hearing. Alan E. Murad, 19 Keel Way. This is a proposed septic system upgrade. It's an RDA.
Good evening. Wayne Barrs with Tech Land Design, representing Ellen Murad. She's the trustee of Murad Real Estate Trust. 19 Keel Way. It's a house I've worked on a number of times. The Murads are selling the house, and in selling the house, you have to go to an inspection. When they inspected the system, they found it inadequate. Really? So Steve Doyle has engineered a plan here to show you. It's an expansion or a additional leaching field which is needed. And basically, as you can see from the setback distances, it's shoehorned in as an addition to the existing leaching field. And luckily, it's situated 90% in the driveway. So it's 11.5 feet from the house, it's 10 feet from the other system, which it has to be, and it has a nominal setback from the road. The good news here is that the existing system is 112 feet away from the coastal bank, and the new system is more than that, 126 feet away. So we came in with a request for determination saying that this is appropriate. Actually, it's good. It's zone mitigation, actually, because it's improving the system. And very little of the vegetation, one little corner of the island is being removed. It is a strip out. It's a very narrow or shallow strip out of about 2 to 4 inches at the bottom. And so it has to be cut clean and takes out very little vegetation. So if there's any questions you have, I'd be glad to entertain them.
It's 3-bedroom?
5-bedroom.
Could you describe the strip-out area, what you mean?
Strip out is when the soil is inadequate and they have to take out the soil and replace it. with good soil. So when you do those, if you look at the soil tests in there, they go down in layers and horizon. There's an A layer, a B layer. Those are fairly new soils, subsoils. C layer, the C horizon is where the septic system has to reside. And all through that, it has to have good percolation. So if they find anything that isn't, they strip it all out and they put back what is needed. In some cases, it's this deep. In other cases, it's this deep, which happens to be the situation here.
You strip it out and you put the new tank on top of this,
No, you
change the
strip it out, you
soil?
put in different soil.
Different
Put in
soil, yeah.
permeable soil
Yep.
is what it is, exactly.
But the system itself is not changing significantly, it's just
No.
the soil which needs to be replaced?
Now, what they found is
And
the tank is adequate to take the solids, 1,500-gallon tank. The leaching capacity, however, was substandard. So they're increasing the leaching capacity, which is spreading the effluent more over more area. It's better for conservation, it's better for the
Sure.
health. Oh, by the way, the Board of Health has approved this plan
Okay.
as well. So,
Keeping it away. Okay,
Okay.
great house.
I don't imagine there are any comments from the non-existent audience.
Okay.
Do you have any other comments, Drew?
No, I was gonna mention Board of Health, but Wayne covered that, so.
Motion for negative determination.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay,
Motion is passed.
good to go, Wayne.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a beautiful house.
I'll pass around the permits to be signed and a couple more updates as you're signing the permits. There were 3 certificates of compliance on the agenda, no issues with the inspection on any of them. So there's no need to discuss. Caitlin, our assistant agent, has taken an expanded weekend to attend a refuge partnership meeting in Virginia over, she's down there today and will be there over the weekend. This is something that the Friends Group of the Mashpee National Wildlife Refuge attends every year, and Caitlin was invited to go this year. And today, we got an email from the president of the Friends Group, Mary Kay Fox, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, saying that Caitlin was meeting with Senator Keating and a couple of other representatives from the state of Massachusetts to discuss the refuge system and what needs, what the Mashpee National Wildlife Refuge needs in terms of, funding and things like that. So she's already off to a great start, and it's a great experience for her too. As you all know, her main focus of her position is management of the conservation lands. So she's really, taking it by the horns and diving in deep, which is great. And so it was nice to see that update.
Loving with the big guys.
That's right. Yeah. She'll have my job in a matter of months. On the negative side of things, this was the most recent violation that we had discovered on conservation land. This is, some of you are familiar with this area. This is Back Road, which leads to the Johns Pond public parking lot at the Johns Pond Beach. Someone has, this guardrail was installed a few years ago to stop folks who were getting into the parcel. They were creating a lot of roads around the gate, which is just before you hit the parking lot at Johns Pond on the left-hand side. So we put up this guardrail. It extends all the way to a natural wetland barrier that you can't get around in a vehicle. So someone decided to cut their way through. We had initially thought that they were trying to get into the parcel. As it turns out, they were getting out of the parcel onto Back Road. And in the process of doing so and blazing their own trail, they lost their bumper and license plate, which was promptly found by DPW. And so they gave it to the police, and the police contacted the gentleman who caused all the damage. And so we'll be sending out 2 sets of fines at $300 apiece for destruction of town property and destruction of conservation land. He's also looking at the repair for that section of the guardrail. We're in the process of getting an estimate for that. And Caitlin was very detailed in her approach to assess all of the damage to the vegetation that took place inside the guardrail, which is all conservation land. Several small trees were cut. A lot of small or medium-sized shrubs were run over.
Where's he going?
Well, that's the interesting part about this whole scenario, is that seeing he was already in the parcel. We found out that he had gotten in from this side of town. There's a dirt road that leads to a private residence, but also leads to a gate that's owned. It's part of the Johns Pond Conservation Area, but it's owned by Arenda Wildlife Trust. And we were trying to think of how they got in. I drove out to this particular location, and there's a road, a pathway around this particular gate. It's one that's been, looks like it's been there for a while, so this gentleman, I don't think he created this pathway around the gate. But he drove all the way through the parcel, entering it from that side to this side, came through and probably saw the gate at the end of the dirt road and tried to get around it, saw the guardrail, and decided to cut his way through. What's baffling is that why didn't he just turn around and go back the way he came in? And the reports are that he was probably pretty well inebriated and wasn't really thinking along those terms, so probably just get out now.
He made a pretty good
I have a
attempt to
chainsaw.
actually just go through the guardrail too, a little bit further down. He actually managed to move one of those posts a little bit. You can see that.
Oh, did he? Oh, yeah, okay.
Then he backed up and wheeled around a couple of times.
Yeah.
Cut down a bunch of trees, and then he cut the guardrail.
Yeah. You look through there, it's amazing
Quite
what
the
he
busy little
trailblazed
gate.
through, because it is thick. I mean, it's really, really thick in that area.
Or his bumper out, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's karma for you, right there.
Well, leaving the license plate there was
Yeah, leaving the license plate. How
an
thoughtful.
interesting technique.
So all's well that ends well there.
Here's
you know.
a clue. Where's my license plate?
That's
Find me.
right. Yeah, come find me. All too happy to do that.
Someday when I'm having a bad day, I'm gonna remember this story and feel better.
Yeah, and probably the fine is pretty small compared to the damage to his truck.
Yeah, I can't imagine what the rest of his vehicle looked like. I mean, it must have been all scratched up, because
Oh, yeah.
I was walking through there, I couldn't even see where the trail was. I mean, because he ran over these bushes, they must have stood back upright again, because I didn't
Yeah, I
see any
couldn't figure out
trail.
exactly where he came in either.
Yeah,
This is on back
it
road?
looked like he got airdropped. Like,
It really did.
Was it determined that he was just off-roading? He was looking at,
he was just
that was
off-roading.
his purpose?
Yeah, yeah, he wasn't.
So just a little ways down there is the beach.
Oh,
Shell
geez.
Beach. And,
Yeah, this is
on
like
top-
maybe 300 feet before you hit the beach at the dead end road. Yeah, and that's basically. Yeah, I was shocked to find out that he was already in, and this was his way out. That was really.
I wouldn't have
I was
guessed that.
convinced that he was just trying to get in, which I thought was even more
least he
brave,
kept it
because
neat.
you're right next to the
Posts.
public road, cutting with a chainsaw. I'm assuming he used a chainsaw, because that's pressure reinforced wood. That's good.
That's a clean cut.
4 or 5
yeah.
inches thick. So,
Well, and then cutting down a bunch of trees too. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
quite industrious.
yeah.
He tried to cause himself a lot of trouble.
That's all I have.
That's it.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.